Support for this podcast comes from Frito-Lay and the 2023 Snack Bracket Championship. The Frito-Lay Snack-It Challenge is underway, and fans are voting on their favorite snacks to crown champion. We're talking about prime-time matchups between the best 64 snacks in the land. Will Ruffles Ridges reign supreme? Can Doritos defend their dynasty? Or will Smart Food use their smarts for a surprise upset? Only you can decide. Get in on all the action for a chance to win up to $1,000 or a year's worth of snacks. Let your snacks be heard. Just go to fritolaysnackit.sbnation.com to vote and enter for a chance to win. No purchase necessary. Sweepstakes ends April 3rd, 2023. Void where prohibited. Year's worth of snacks awarded in the form of 52 coupons, each good for one bag of chips. See official rules at fritolaysnackit.sbnation.com.
This is the Black Gold Banneret Podcast. Now, here are your hosts, Jeff Sharon and Eric Lopez.
Welcome to the show. Jeff Sharon along with you here, along with Andrew Gluchov and Bryson Turner joining us here for this first segment. Eric has had it. He's off the reservation. He's like, I can't do it this week. I just can't. We're back after a 1 week hiatus, by the way, because I was on vacation and I was, running around the Wild West, as it were, and I leave town, and all of a sudden the college football playoff decided to expand by 200%, apparently. And we got a 12-team playoff that's going to happen. We're going to talk about that a little bit later. Drew, how are you?
I'm great. Having a little summer shandy. 'Tis the season.
Bryson, what's going on, man?
I thought we were going to be talking the bannies this week, but hey, we got some stuff to cover. It looks like we got to push it to next week.
We pushed it to next week. And the reason why is because technically this season's not over, and that's why you're here in our first segment to talk about. We're going to talk about the CFP stuff later on. It'll be me and Drew talking about it, but Bryson is here to talk a little bit of track and field. All right, so let's catch you up on what's going on with this story right now regarding Rayniah Jones. By the way, there are two UCF athletes, either current or former, who are going to be competing in the United States Olympic trials this weekend, the track and field trials out in Eugene, where we just saw the NCAA championships, where we had two UCF athletes competing, and Rayniah Jones finished in second in the 100-meter hurdle. She gets the NCAA silver medal, brings home a nice trophy and a silver medal. Congrats to Rayniah. She ran a pretty good time. It wasn't her personal best, but we were sharing it on social media. Wow, she really actually had a late charge to get that silver medal, and she gets to stay in Eugene for the week and compete in the U.S. Olympic trial. So, Bryson, I'll start with you. Let's just recap the weekend at the NCAAs that UCF had. And Rayniah was the real highlight, wasn't she?
Oh yes, for sure. I was watching the final live, and as they kind of started, I was definitely worried seeing her fall behind, but looking back at that replay, those last two hurdles, she just turned on the afterburner, and as soon as I saw her go across the line, I'm like, holy crap, she just got second.
Right.
I was basically like Dana Boone. Like we talked to Eric talked to Dana Boone after the game, and I saw the interview for the article I wrote about it, and she was basically had a very similar reaction. In fact, she didn't even know that she got second. She thought she had like third or fourth, but those last two hurdles, I have to applaud Rayniah for doing that. That was a major, definitely the run of her season, besides the one that got her qualified for the trials.
She comes in second to Anna Cockrell of USC, who was coached by Carol Smith Gilbert, UCF's former track and field coach, who, by the way, hours after USC wrapped up the women's team championship, she announced she was becoming the new head coach at Georgia for both the women's and the men's teams at Georgia. So that's an interesting little note. But Rayniah finishes with a 12.82. Cockrell finished with a 12.58. It was tight down to the wire, but Rayniah beats Akara Nugent of Baylor, another freshman, by 2/100ths of a second, and outpaces Grace Stark of Florida by 7/100ths of a second to take the silver. Now, she now turns her attention to the U.S. Olympic trials, which is a whole different ballgame in the 100-meter hurdles. But as I had mentioned earlier this week, let's not forget that Rayniah at the UCF invite earlier this spring, when she set the school record in the hurdles at 12.73, that was the 6th fastest time in the women's 100-meter hurdles this year. So where does that put her, Bryson, in terms of the potential to make the Olympic team heading into the first round, which will be happening late this week?
Well, I think what's going to be interesting is it's going to depend on how long it's been before the Olympic for some of the athletes, as far as professional, have gotten into the Olympics. Because you have to remember that this Olympic trials comes 1 year after when the trials were supposed to be because of COVID. And so, for example, one of the professional athletes that'll be at the trials is Kendra Harrison, who owns the world record in the women's 100-meter hurdles. And she qualified with a 12.43 time. And I did not see when she ran that, but if she ran that in, say, 2019, then coming into this Olympic trials, it's an entirely different ball game. So the biggest thing for me is the professionals are going to come in, and I can only go off of their previous Olympic performances, at least from what I've researched. And so they're a little bit murky, but obviously you should not, doubt them. They do this professionally for a reason. But what we can do is look at some of the collegiate runners that she will have to go against in the trials and compare their performance there. And so from that perspective, I think that her chances of making the Olympic team, or at least her finishes among the collegiate athletes, she's going to be right on the fringe. If there are 3 athletes that are going to be going into this women's 100 meters, and you just talked about the collegiate athletes, I think Rayniah could make it in as either the 3rd one or the alternate. And this is because there are 3 runners that I'm looking at right now, at least collegiately, that I think could make it. And that is Tanea Marshall of LSU, who qualified for the trials with a 12.44 and did not start in the championship race for the women's 100 meters, presumably because they were going to save her for this trial. So she gave up, or either her or her coach gave up a possible NCAA championship to prepare her for this. And the fact that she has the 2nd fastest qualifying time, only a 100th of a second behind Kendra Harrison, that I think is kind of bodes for how formidable Tanea Marshall is, even though she did not race in the NCAA championship race. Now, you also have Chanel Brissett from Texas. She did not make the NCAA championships because she had a false start in the 100-meter hurdles in the NCAA West prelims. So she actually is coming into this event on some pretty good rest as far as the 100-meter hurdle event goes, though she did compete in the 4x100 meter relay for the Longhorns. And then that brings us to the only woman that beat Rayniah in the championship, Anna Cockrell. Cockrell qualified for the Olympic trials with a 12.54, the 4th fastest qualifying time among everybody there. And even in this race, she beat Rayniah with a 12.58, which is not that far off from her qualifying time. So if I'm Rayniah, I basically need to beat that night's invite time, 12.73, and then some, in order to not just compete with the collegiate athletes that are on the board, but also now you bring in the professional athletes as well, including two past gold medalists in the event.
Yeah. One other person who we know actually won't be there, Nia Ali, who made the Olympic team in 2016, was a silver medalist in Rio, but she won't be competing because she announced actually last month that she was pregnant with her 3rd child. So congratulations to Nia. So she decided she won't compete, at least as far as we know. But like you said, Harrison, Brissett, we don't know what else is going to, and it's going to be a tough road for Rayniah to get there. But at least she has a chance to be there on the track, and she has a chance at the final if she doesn't false start or any of that kind of stuff. So, so I think that's key. And then second of all, here's what I think is actually really important. I want to know what you think about this. Is all right. Number one, she's going to be competing on this level. It's always important to get that experience. You never know if you have a good race, somebody falls or something. you could end up in the top 3, or if you end up in the top 4, you could be an alternate, and then who knows what could happen. And I think that we were mentioning that earlier, that there might be an issue with one of the favorites in the 100 hurdles. Is that right?
Yes. I mentioned earlier that there are 2 previous gold medalists in the women's 100-meter hurdles that are going to be competing in these Olympic trials. The first one is that isn't like the problematic one is Dawn Harper. She was a gold medalist in Beijing and a silver medalist in the London Games. So she's going to be in the Olympic trials. But the one I'm going to watch, but the other gold medalist, the gold medalist of this event in Rio, who was the gold medalist for that USA sweep of the podium, is Brianna Rollins. And so the story with her is that earlier, just about a week and a half ago, she was banned, or the story I'm talking about comes a week and a half ago. She was banned for 5 years because of a doping case, and so that should keep her out. But as it turns out, Rollins submitted an appeal that is now had her ban frozen. So she's now able to run in the Olympic trials. I'm looking at the entry list right now, and her running and her time that got her to the trials was a 12.61. So which is a faster time than Rayniah's qualifying time. Mm-hmm. But here's the thing: is the determination of whether she can compete in Tokyo or not, if she does make the team, is going to come down to an appeal hearing that's going to be heard on July 23rd. So if the situation comes to it where Brianna makes it into the top 3 and say Rayniah is 4th, then we could be in a situation where we really needed to get ready for that July 23rd hearing to see if Rayniah could possibly make the team, because if Brianna Rollins is denied to go to Tokyo because of this.
Interesting. Yes. Boy, that's really interesting. Worst case scenario, if Rayniah doesn't make it, obviously, like we talked about, this is some great experience for her. And the thing I think that's easy for everybody to forget is, the 2020 Olympics are taking place in 2021. It's only 3 more years until the next Olympics. So we could very well see her in 2024 and make the run up to the Paris Games while undertaking her career at UCF, assuming she doesn't decide to turn pro, which is a possibility with track and field athletes all the time, or transfer. But this is that's another key thing for a young athlete to do, especially somebody like her who's 19 years old and has already presented such great talent at such a so quickly. This is a really good place for her to be in terms of gaining confidence and experience, right?
Oh, yes. I mean, if you look at the lineup, if you include Tanea Marshall, who didn't start, in the NCAA championship for this event, there are only 3 underclassmen of the 9. There is Rayniah Jones, Karen Nugent, who did not qualify for the trials, by the way. Of the 9 people to qualify for the NCAA championships, Nugent was the only one. It's the only one that isn't qualified for the Olympic trials. And then there is Kentucky sophomore Masai Russell, who actually is qualified for the trials, actually. She qualified, I believe, with the time of, what was it? There it is, 12.9. So she qualified for the trials. But as an underclassman, managing to compete at that level is a major achievement for her. And so obviously, when we're talking about the Olympic trials, she could see some of these upperclassmen, like Anna Cockrell, for instance, in the next Olympic trials. But I think that gaining that experience, especially if she does stay with UCF and track coach Dana Boone all the way through until their senior year, then I could easily see her as a realistic candidate for the team in 2024 if she does.
All right. And her first race, when is that going to be taking place, Bryson? Because there's more than there's a first round, then there's the quarters and semis, and then the final. Is that right?
Yes. So as far as the first round goes, the first round is scheduled to happen at 5:04 p.m. local time, which means it'll be about 8:04 p.m. our time on June 19th. But the thing is that I'm sure a lot of Olympic followers will know about this. NBC loves their tape delays on these things. So I looked at the schedule at the broadcast schedule for June 19th, and it says that the trials will be broadcast on NBC Sports Network from 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. So it's possible. So I don't know if it's going to be live, but that's when NBC Sports Network is going to be covering the trials.
Well, it is in that window, right?
From 10 to 11.
Yeah,
so
it is in that window, right? So we probably should be able to see it live then, that first round at least.
As long as NBC allows it, it's
right.
Gonna. So I would say keep an eye on those time slots, because NBC is going to air it sometime in that time slot. We just don't know when.
Okay, so Saturday, June 19th, 8 p.m. on NBC Sports Network is when we should just keep an eye on it, right?
Exactly.
Okay. Now, there is one more athlete we need to take a look at who is a UCF alum who's taking her shot at the Olympics. Anne-Marie Blaney, one of the great distance runners in UCF history, who's graduated after a decorated career. She's chasing after a spot on the U.S. Olympic team in the 10,000 meters. She just set her personal best, actually, about a month ago on May 14th in Irvine, California, with a 32:03 in the 10K, which puts her, according to USA Track and Field, at about 13. That's the 13th best time this year in the 10,000. Now, she is, to put it lightly, a dark horse, but at least she's going to be competing in this respect as well. So we're going to be keeping a close eye on her. Now, she has she has quite the ladder to climb, though, if I'm not mistaken. Is that right, Bryson? Because I'm looking at the 10,000 final, or the best 10,000 meter teams this year, or 10,000 times, I should say, and the best one is 30:47 rather, by Elise Cranny, which is set back on February 20th. She, Carissa Schweitzer, and Emily Infield. Infield, I think, is actually a familiar name to track and fielders. All finished. Cranny and Schweitzer finished under 31. Infield finished at 31:08, and Blaney is still at 32:03. So unless she finds a way to knock almost a minute off of her time in the next month, which is a pretty big ask, it's going to be tough to see if she can actually make it into the field. But again, you never know. It's distance running. It's weird. Crazy stuff happens in distance events. So at least we'll get the chance to see Anne-Marie Blaney out there one more time in the 10K. Do we know when that event's going to happen, Bryson? I'm looking to see what the schedule is.
It's actually not this weekend. It's actually next weekend. It's a week later. It's going to be
okay.
It's going to be the women's, because of course this is a distance running thing. That means that there isn't really a first round or anything. It's just all one thing. And so that means it's called the final, and I'm saying final in air quotes because it's just the 10,000 meters and you have everybody in it. So that's going to be happening at 6:44 p.m. local time on June 26th. So that means it will be at 9:44 p.m. our time. And looking at NBC's airing schedule, they air the trials that night on the main channel, NBC, from 9 to 11 p.m. So
now, I don't think they're going to spend 30 minutes of the major network's time following the 10K. I think they're going to they're probably going to show the race and then cut to field events during it. If I'm not mistaken, right?
I would agree with that. But if it is something that our viewers would want to follow up on, then that's where they'll probably have some intermittent coverage of that race. So if you want to see Anne-Marie Blaney do that, it'll be there. But you basically did nail the analysis as far as this goes, because Elise Cranny has managed to qualify with 30:47.42, which is far and away faster than Anne-Marie Blaney by a long shot as far as track goes.
And her only competition is Schweitzer, who finished a half a second behind her at that one event, an event called the 10, which was back in February 20th. So now, granted, funny. that was a while ago. It was 4 months ago, but still.
I know. This is actually what's interesting about this is actually Anne-Marie Blaney's second time to try and qualify for the 2020 Olympics. And because before COVID struck, because there were some Olympians that had already been decided before COVID struck, because the marathon Olympic trial happened before COVID shut down in February 2020, and Blaney did compete for that. So I thought personally, as someone who's been seeing how much impact COVID-19 has had on the sports world, to now see Emery Blaney compete in another trial for a 2020 Olympic event, almost like about a year and a half apart. I mean, that just kind of goes to show you how much COVID has really affected these games. And I'll be very interested to see what kind of presence it'll have here. But it could also have given Emery an opportunity to better prepare for this 10,000 meters in a way that it would be much better than, coming, about a month or so after running a marathon. So yeah, at least it gives him time to do that.
So U.S. Olympic trials coming up this weekend, and then going forth into next weekend, 2 UCF athletes competing. Bryson, you'll be writing up a little preview for us, I believe, before we head into the weekend. Is that right?
Yes, I will try and knock that out tomorrow. I should be able to get it out before Saturday.
All right, sounds good. We'll be on the lookout for it. Bryson Turner joining us here on the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast. Thank you, Bryson. Keep an eye on things. I know I'll be watching it live because I'm a huge Olympic nerd. I love track and field. I'm particularly interested in always seeing who's going to be competing for the U.S. in these events, and the fact that we have 2 UCF athletes who are going to be competing for a spot on the Olympic team, I think, is a wonderful thing. In addition to Phil Dalhouser, who's going to be who obviously didn't play an NCAA sport at UCF, but is a UCF graduate, and will be in the Olympics again in Tokyo in beach volleyball. One more go at it for Phil Dalhouser again. All right, Bryson, thank you so much, man. It's good to talk to you, and enjoy the weekend.
Thank you very much. You too.
All right, when we get back, Andrew Gluchov is going to join us again to talk more about. Oh my God, the college football playoff is going to 12 teams. I can't believe it's going to 12 teams. Like, this is mind blowing. Like, I'm still recovering from it, and I was learning about it while I was up in Wyoming on vacation. Stick around, I'll be right back.
Today's episode is brought to you by Cars.com. With over 2 million vehicles and 50,000 more added every day, Cars.com will match you with the perfect car for you, your budget, your life, your style. And if you're ready to say goodbye to your current car, Cars.com will get you an instant offer to cash it in. Just start by entering your license plate and get matched with a local dealer who will write you the check. So whether you're looking to buy or sell, just go to Cars.com. It's magical.
Welcome back to the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast. Jeff Sharon, Andrew Gluchov joining you. Eric's got the week off, and Andrew and I are here to talk about the big news in college sports that broke last week when we didn't have a show, because of course it does, while I'm out in Wyoming, is the college football playoff. It is not quite official. It may be by the end of the month, but the college football playoff working group, which consisted of 4 key administrators in working within college football, announced last week that they will recommend to the CFP management committee that the college football playoff expand from a 4-team to a 12-team tournament. The working group, by the way, consisted of the following people: Bob Bowlesby, who's the commissioner of the Big 12, Greg Sankey, the commissioner of the SEC, Craig Thompson, the commissioner of the Mountain West, and the athletic director at Notre Dame, Jack Swarbrick. So a little surprising, actually, considering the names involved, that they were so they were so progressive on this format change. They will propose officially to the College Football Playoff Management Committee, which is basically all of the athletic directors plus Jack Swarbrick, either tomorrow, which would be Thursday the 17th, or Friday the 18th. The management committee is expected to review the recommendation and that'll be taking place at Chicago. If they endorse the 12-team proposal, this is from a press release by the College Football Playoff, then If they reach consensus on an alternative model or decide to retain the current 14 format, it will then be forwarded to the CFP Board of Managers, which will be meeting next week, June 22nd, in Dallas. Now, the managers are one president each from each of the FBS conferences, plus Reverend John Jenkins, who's the president of Notre Dame. So that kind of gives you who they're talking to. The representative of the American, by the way, is the president of SMU, Gerald Turner. On the 22nd, if the presidents give it the okay, then they will decide whether they're going to, quote, authorize feasibility assessments and potentially discussions with other entities that would allow for implementation of any format, including, basically, they would decide how and when and where they would implement it. All right. The overall, the format that the management or that the what is it? The committee, the working group proposed is the following. Obviously, 12 teams. Calendar still has to get worked out, but the first round games, the top 4 teams would get buys to the second round, to the quarterfinals, essentially. The first round games would take place on campus sites sometime during the 2-week period after the conference championships. Quarterfinals would be played on January 1st, New Year's Day, or January 2nd, when New Year's Day falls on a Sunday and on an adjacent day. So New Year's Eve and New Year's Day, or January 1, it could be New Year's Day and January 2, or if January 1st is a Sunday, then you would have the NFL, and so they would push it to like January 2 and January 3, for example. Semifinals and championship games would be determined. Semifinals would likely not be played as a doubleheader, which I'm a little bit surprised at. The bracket would follow the rankings with no modifications made to avoid rematches of teams that had played during the regular season or from the same conference. The bracket would remain in effect throughout the playoff. In other words, there would be no reseeding, depending on who won. They did not include deciding which bowls would be part of the college football playoff, but they did recommend that if traditional bowls host games, they would be assigned to the traditional bowls for quarterfinal games. And then all 11 games would obviously be under the CFP umbrella. So, wow. The other thing that actually was recommended, and this is where it comes in big for UCF, is of the 12 teams, the top 6 ranked conference champions would get automatic bids. Notice I said 6, not 5, which means ostensibly you would have the champions of the Power 5 conferences plus the best group of 5 conference champion. But you could, in theory, like you did in 2020, have 2 group of 5 conference champions if they're ranked ahead of one of the Power 5 teams, such as, for example, Coastal Carolina was and Cincinnati was with respect to the Pac-12. If they did it this year, the Pac-12 wouldn't have been in it. So, holy smokes, Andrew Gluchov.
Holy smokes.
This is really happening.
Yeah, it is. Let's be honest. This has been something that's been clamored for from day one. When they moved from the BCS and that system to the CFP, and they were doing this 4-team playoff, immediately there was a push to grow it. Because let's be honest, the way it was set up, it wasn't going to really be a playoff, just because it was too small. It was just the nature of it. So,
well, everyone calls it an invitational because,
well, it is.
It's essentially,
by definition, is.
Yeah, it's essentially right now 4 at-large teams.
Right. There's no grounds for qualifying, which is where this 12-team format changes the games, because now you have grounds for qualification, and that's where the playoff aspect actually starts coming into play. The NFL playoff has grounds for qualification. You win your division, you're in. Then you get the wild cards.
As Eric Lopez calls it, criteria.
At that point, you're arguing semantics, but the truth is, by having that structure, having something concrete of here's how this works, it opens the door. Now, there's a lot of details we don't have because they haven't been fleshed out yet, such as, are these top 6 conference champions going to be the top 6 seeds? Hasn't been decided. My guess is going to be, other than the top 4, which they did say will be conference champions, They have not addressed number 5 or number 6 yet. I think that's going to be fleshed out, but and probably end up not being one of those, the top seed automatically. I don't think they'll give number 5 and number 6 that home field advantage in the first round. I think they're going to give that to the top at large. If the top at large is ahead of the 5th conference champion, which may or may not be the case. But the cool thing about not having automatic qualifiers, and if you read the Sports Illustrated article that they came out, Ross Dellinger wrote it, was just absolutely loaded with information and good stuff. And they talked about how the term AQ or automatic qualifiers is a dirty word. and they wanted to specifically avoid it. And if you actually look at history, the Bowl Coalition, the BCS.
Oh, you're going way back with that one.
Yeah, you go all the way back to the Bowl Alliance and the Coalition, the BCS, the CFP. Those top 1-2 slots have never had an automatic qualifier for a conference. The only issue was you didn't have the Big Ten or Pac-10 originally, and that's where the BCS fixed that. But they never actually locked any of those spots up based on conference affiliation. Right. So this actually follows that consistency of not having the conference affiliation lock in to really give not only the impression that everyone has a shot, but with the way the language is written now, everyone legitimately does have a shot now.
So it's still not, and this is the part where I always get scared because because I'm cynical like this. Like the athletic directors still have to either sign off on this, or they could say, "Nah, we're going to keep it at 4," or they could say, "Nah, we're going to change it slightly." And actually, I forget who it was. I think it was Andy Staples who said earlier. I think it was earlier today. He said that one tweak they might add to it is putting the quarterfinals at campus sites instead of in neutral sites.
I would love that. I'm a big fan of the home game atmosphere, and I can see two different camps on this one. The first one is there's money to be had for the home team getting the gate in, and just the away team just gets their expenses covered. So
and if you only did it with right, and I'm sorry to interrupt, but if you only did like the 5-12, 6, 11, 7, 10, 8, 9 games on campus sites, that means that the top 4 teams, they wouldn't get a home game out of that.
Right. They're trading in that home game for a bye, and that's money in your pocket, right? Because, the home team gets the gate, they get the parking, they get the concessions, they get all that good stuff. And the only expenses are for the away team's travel that would be covered through that. I think part of this is they don't want small stadiums. That's two things. And one of them, small stadiums hosting that big level game. Like take the Bounce House. Bounce House is not a big stadium. It's about, it's 44,000 and change. It does not have a high level of amenities. That just is. When you compare to, Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta, you just can't compare it. It's not a fair comparison, or Jerry World down in Arlington, Texas, or the Rose Bowl. You can't compare one to the other. So I think that's part of it there. And two, the last thing I think they want is a semifinal game in East Lansing, Michigan
in January,
in early January,
right.
Where, the breath that comes out of you immediately freezes into icicles.
6 inches of snow on the ground. And it would make for some entertaining television, I'll tell you that.
It would, but I think they feel that the quality of football would be taken away. And at least with the Southern stadiums and the dome stadiums, you get to negate a lot of the weather issues and make it more of a fair game. And I think that's another avenue that they're probably going to look at.
Interesting. Let's think about this from the UCF perspective now. This is a coup.
It's a game changer.
As Coach Malzahn said, it tweeted out.
It is a
totally game changer. This means that, yes, UCF can now compete on the field for a undisputed national championship, as can the other 64 teams in the so-called Group of Five. This takes us to the debate that's been going on for a week now on Twitter about who deserves credit.
Oh boy,
for actually getting Swarbrick and all these guys in the working group to be convinced to give the Group of Five a shake of the pie here, right? So I will ask you to start out, who deserves credit? Is it Danny White? Is it Mike Oresco? Is it all of the Group of Five teams? Is it Jack Swarbrick? In your mind, and list as many of them as you want. Who, in your opinion, gets to do a victory lap here and say, "Hey, we were at least part, not the reason, but at least part of the reason why we now have this more full, more participatory, or will have, hopefully, if all goes well, this 12-team playoff."
Well, let's start with the CFP Management Committee, which is all the commissioners plus Jack Swarbrick. They're the ones who decided to create this team. This wasn't done in a vacuum. This was actually very particularly done. They took the Big 12 and the SEC commissioners, because they've been around the longest out of the Power Five conferences, and wanted a good cut. You can't do anything. Well, I take that back. The SEC, Greg Skanky over there is he's newer, but the thing is, you can't do anything without SEC support.
Right.
You take him. Bowlesby's been around the block a lot. He's got a lot of experience, and you take them, it becomes a little more geographical. You take him, covers the other half of the country, really. The Pac-12, brand new commissioner, you can't ask anything of him. The ACC overlaps the SEC too much. Big Ten's got its own issues. So you go there. Jack Swarbrick, being Notre Dame, becomes is a wild card, and I think he brings a really unique perspective, and I actually think he deserves an extra amount of credit more than anyone else in the room when it's all said and done. And then and they specifically said the reason why Craig Thompson from the Mountain West was picked is because he was the longest tenured commissioner out of the Group of Five. And okay, they had to be commissioned by someone. They're commissioned by the CFP Management Committee, which was the 11 commissioners and Jack Swarbrick. So obviously that group of 12 gets the first layer of credit. They're the ones who said, let's do this. The second layer then goes to the four guys in the room who somehow, through a lot of tough work, managed to keep this from leaking. This started in 2019.
Yep.
Did not leak. It almost got blown when in Dallas, a Notre Dame fan found Jack Swarbrick and asked him what he was doing there. And Swarbrick had to come up with a good excuse. Oh, it was an industry meeting. Yeah, it was an industry meeting.
Yeah, it's just some industry meeting.
I'm telling you, Ross Dellinger's SI article about this was fantastic.
Must read. It was really
Must
good.
read. Fantastic. Can't emphasize it anymore. Those guys put the blueprint of this all together. The third layer goes back to the CFP Management Committee, who then sends it off to the presidents and whatnot. And it's going to be tweaked a little bit. But, the main four guys, Greg Sankey, Bob Bowlesby, Craig Thompson, and Swarbrick.
Swarbrick, yeah.
Yeah, Swarbrick. Sorry, Jack Swarbrick. I've got to give those guys the lion's share of the credit. They're the ones who did the work. And Jack Swarbrick especially, because he actually put Notre Dame at a disadvantage willingly for the betterment of everybody else. He could have thrown a wrench in this, but he chose not to. Notre Dame does not qualify for a bye because they cannot win a conference championship. And he was willing to accept that. I mean, wow, I did not see that one coming.
I'd be happy taking that home game, though.
Here's who I don't give credit to. Any athletic director outside of Jack Swarbrick. None. I don't give credit to any of them.
Not even Danny White.
Even Danny White.
For at least laying the groundwork. And now, here's where you and I disagree. Okay? I do believe that Danny White deserves at least some credit because he publicly showed that the Emperor had no clothes with regard to the current format. Because you remember when the 14 playoffs started in, what was it, 2013? Was it?
2014.
No, 2014. Okay. That it was being sold as, finally, this is the thing. This is the play. No more split national championships. No more disputes. None of that. This is the be-all, end-all. And first of all, credit is due to Scott Frost and the UCF players on the 2017 team.
The players
undefeated.
Deserve a lot of credit.
Yes. Who went undefeated, beat Auburn, won the conference, beat Auburn, who beat both Georgia and Alabama, the participants in the championship game that year. Credit to them. Then I do give credit to Danny White, who boldly on that field declared national champs. I don't care what you have to say. And ignited the debate about, wow, okay, the Emperor really doesn't have any clothes here. Maybe this is not the be-all, end-all as it was being sold to be. All right? So I do believe he deserves at least some credit for publicly kind of throwing out the established narrative, and like I say, it's the right comparison, saying the Emperor had no clothes here. So you say he doesn't deserve any credit at all?
Well, let's think about it. This started in 2019, and the catalyst, UCF was a major catalyst. Make no bones about it. 2017 comes and goes. They didn't do anything. 2018 happens. Teams won 25 straight games. They can't get over 8th place. Oh, we have a problem.
Yeah.
That was when it really hit. And it was during that offseason is when things started to happen. You had enough ammo because, Boise State, Houston, and Western Michigan, they had good runs, but they didn't really have something sustained. I mean, if any school won 25 straight games in the BCS era, they'd be in the national championship game, and they knew it. Boise State ended up second. TCU's ended up second. Utah ended up second on single seasons as a non-power conference.
Utah did it twice, I think. Is that right?
I think TCU did it. I think Boise did it twice. I forget exactly. I know
Utah had 04 and I think 08.
You're right. They did have 04. And then 08, which they got retroactively given a national championship similar to UCF. And it was actually because of UCF that happened, but that's neither here nor there.
Right.
They, in singular seasons, were able to get all the way up to within the top 6 and eventually finish second. UCF never got higher than 8th, riding 25-game win streak. There's a problem here. And they finally admitted it. And that's when things started to happen. And they've gone on the record. Mike Oresco's gone on the record. And I'm hoping that we can, find a way to pry more stuff out of this guy to kind of talk about, how this happened, how this all came together. Because, there's a lot of smoke and there's tidbits that people have said over time and in different places. But I mean, it'd be, as we know, Mike likes to talk. You just, would love to, see.
To see ever.
Yeah.
Did you hear the interview with Mark Daniels this week? Because I did. I think Mark asked like 3 questions in 20 minutes.
Well, that's what he does. I mean, the guy just knows how to talk. My friend and former colleague Kyle Nash has had one-on-ones with him, and that's also the thing is the man likes to talk. But when you look at it, the players were the ones who made it happen. They're the ones who won 25 games in a row.
Yeah.
The noise that happened around it doesn't matter. You win or you don't. And you don't win on TV, talking in a press conference. You win on the field. And that's what they did. They deserve the lion's share of public credit. The national championship, initially it was a claim. It was shortly basically recognized by the NCAA once that final rankings came out, because they actually, the declaration came before the rankings finalized. So
right.
there was a degree of risk there.
Yeah, it was before Wesley Colley's final poll came out.
Right. And there was a degree of risk there. And I know there's some people who sometimes get the dates mixed up, but yeah, the claim came first. The actual recognition came later. Mm-hmm. In the end, you take that away, I think the result would have ultimately been the same. They still would have realized this team won 25 games in a row and still can't get over 8th. We have a problem.
Yeah. Let me ask you this about the the non-A5, which is what I prefer to call the G5, commissioners, in particular, Mike Aresco. And this is kind of what you alluded to just a second ago, is for all the arm waving that Danny White did, all right, that's like Greg Sankey doesn't pay any attention to that, okay? Jack Swarbrick doesn't care, all right? These guys have been running college football for a long, long time. They do not care about Twitter. They really don't, all right? They don't have Twitter accounts. They care even less about it overall. So what they do care about is money, okay? So what about, Mike Aresco? We talked about Thompson from the Mountain West and some of those other guys who were actually in the room. They are part of the management committee that actually makes decisions on this. They're part of the meetings, right? You can't tell me, and I'd love to, this is one of those things where I hope we can get Mike Aresco on our show because I'd love to ask him, that you can't tell me that at some point in the last 2 years, right, that Mike Aresco wasn't on the phone with Thompson from the Mountain West saying, hey, what are you guys working on? What are you guys thinking? Hey, look, what about this idea? How can we push this forward for our conferences to be included in this in some way, shape, manner, or form in a way that is acceptable to everybody? I don't think it's correct, as some on Twitter have argued, that Mike Aresco deserves 0 credit for what happened, because the fact is, ain't nobody else in the room except for him, right? In terms of the management committee for the CFP. So he's actually going to be one of the people casting the votes on this weekend, or this week, I should say. And I don't understand why UCF fans are so salty towards him when we know for a fact that A, he's the one in the room, he's the one battling for the conference, and B, if you're that upset at him over the fact that you think he was lukewarm towards UCF's national championship claim, well, need I remind you the fact that he was also at the same time negotiating $1 billion television contract with ESPN, who, by the way, can't get a Super Bowl, at least at the time. So the college football playoff, which they're a partner in, is basically their Super Bowl to sell to advertisers, right? So Mike Aresco is not going to publicly crap all over ESPN's premier sports event property because of Danny White. He has to play the game so that he can get the signatures on the dotted line for that gigantic media deal, which enabled us to watch UCF events on ESPN Plus that everyone liked this spring because we couldn't go to the games because of COVID, right?
Right.
So doesn't he deserve at least a little bit of credit here? And I'd like to find out exactly how much more if we can talk to him. But I don't understand the saltiness. I really don't.
Well, I mean,
it just defies logic to me.
I get the saltiness from a short-term standpoint. You feel like you're being left on an island.
And also, if you think that the only things that matter are public statements.
Well, and that's the other thing. Public statements, and in those pressers make fans feel good, but they don't really mean anything in the grand scheme of things. Nothing changes because I went in front of a podium and said, I don't like the way this is done, change it. That's not how it works, as we've seen. It's way more complicated than that. And the thing is, I don't blame UCF fans for feeling the way they feel. Here's the difference. Athletic director only cares about one school. A commissioner has to care about all the schools. And as you've mentioned, they were in the middle of a negotiation for a new media deal. And the last thing you want to do is piss off your media overlord on an upcoming deal, which can then financially backfire and hurt you. You want to play nice. Once the deal was locked in 2019, Oresco's public language changed. During Memphis's season, he got way more aggressive for two reasons. One, as we found out, there was something going on. And obviously we knew, or he knew, that a team was put together to work on options. Now, he didn't know what the options were because they kept it very tight and they were vague in the information that they gave. As the article talks about, Jack Swarbrick was the spokesman, and he basically said, I had to be a lawyer. And he had to just kind of give just enough nuggets to basically get off his case, right? And then move on. The other thing is, you've got all these moving parts, and you have to make friends and influence people. And if you actually look back and you look at the chain of events, and you see it more so during the COVID time, the American got very chummy with the SEC from a commissioner standpoint. Greg Sankey and Mike Oresco talked a lot. In fact, Mike Oresco's method of action seemed to always follow what the SEC did. So he was working on a different avenue of making friends. And while I don't think that played a role in the changing of the CFP, that's part of the commissioner's job, is also managing relationships on a higher level. Mm-hmm. So
mind you, by the way, these two conferences and these two commissioners have already worked together on that basketball challenge, the SEC AAC basketball series.
Mm-hmm.
So there is obviously an ongoing relationship between Greg Sankey and Mike Oresco.
And here's the thing that we have to wonder about. It looks like the concept of P5 and G5 is basically going to go away, because there is no real, there is no Power 5 anymore at that point. Everyone becomes an equal player. The only difference
the only place that it really exists is actually in NCAA. No, actually, it exists in terms of the NCAA's.
The autonomy.
Yeah, the NCAA's ruling, which, by the way, Oresco alluded to with Mark Daniels this week. He said, really, my goal is to try and get us into being one of those gaining that autonomy conference status with regard to NCAA policy votes.
Right. And
that's a whole different ballgame.
Yeah. And that's actually all it applies to, is for football only, autonomy for policy. They changed the meal rules. That was one of the big things that they did. And what they said when this first started, this whole autonomy thing, is the other conferences can choose to join along if they want to. They're not required to, and it won't impact their status in the FBS, but they've all pretty much tried to, because it's, a case of keeping up with the Joneses. I think in the case of the American, the more they can be like that autonomy group, the more likely they have a chance of starting to cover some of that financial gap in subsequent media deals. So to kind of wrap it up, I understand why UCF fans are salty, but they have to understand that Mike Oresco's job is not to satisfy UCF fans. Mike Oresco's job is to work for the benefit of all member schools. And sometimes one may not jive with the other. And that's what happened. I think UCF was more of a victim of timing than anything else. If they had their run in 1920 with no COVID versus 17-18, I think there would have been a very different argument, because you wouldn't be worrying about a new media deal or any of that sort. The chains would be off.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, the timing worked out against UCF, and I think that gets forgotten about.
Yeah. Let's spin this forward to the future. Let's, again, fingers crossed, because listen, I never put it past college administrators to screw up a good idea. All right.
Where's someone make G. Gordon Gee not allowed to vote?
I know. I just, I know, of course, President Cartwright's on board. Of course, Terry Mahadra's on board. It's the other guys I'm not worried about. I am worried about, right? But let's say what we're all hoping happens. 12-team playoff, top 6 ranked conference champions get a bid. I don't even care where they play the games. They could play them all in Anchorage, Alaska, for all I care. I mean, just get us to 12, right? As I told Andy Staples on Twitter. But what do you think that how does this really change the conversation around college football and the future of college football as we think? I have my own ideas, but I want to know what you think is going to stay the same, is going to be different going forward.
Well, in the short term, nothing's going to change. The earliest this could happen is in 2023. There's a lot of parts. And the thing is, it requires a brand new CFP media deal, which is why I don't think this is going to actually happen until the old contract expires. It's just easier to negotiate the new contract based on the new terms.
Well, I do think that ESPN is probably chomping at the bit to kind of get in the negotiating room on this right now, because of the amount of money that they lost due to COVID. And the events that they lost, because they want to get on this real quick, because to them, this is like having the Super Bowl every year.
Right, but the other
instead
thing
of once every 3 or 4 years.
The other thing to keep in mind, and they're talking about potentially $2 billion, coming into the FBS, is there's already deals involved with the New Year's Six, and ESPN owns all the majority of the lower tier bowls. The fact that they've already got a price tag there may take away some of the motivation to cough up more cash, is what is going to end up happening, and they may ride it out. It's only a 2-year difference, so it may be easier to let it ride instead of doing the way more complicated work of trying to speed through to build a whole brand new system financially, or get the approvals and slow build it. So I think they'll end up ultimately slow building it so that everyone kind of gets what they want.
I don't know if it's as difficult as you say. I mean, these giant, Disney doesn't hire all those Harvard MBAs for nothing.
Well, how long did it take the American to negotiate their deal?
Yeah, but that's just one conference.
This is a lot more complicated.
True, but I think you have a lot more people who understand the structure, I think, working on it, as opposed to kind of, feeling out what the secrets are. I'll tell you what I think is probably going to go by the wayside. I think, number one, everyone who was talking about in 2025 we're going to have another massive round of realignment. Mm-hmm. I don't think that's going to happen.
I think this could ultimately kill realignment.
I don't know if it'll kill realignment, but we won't get as much of it as we did. I think that the most realignment you might see might be, for example, we were speculating about this. Like you were saying that you were telling us off the air that Notre Dame kind of enjoyed their short little stint in the ACC, right?
They did, and you can make, and I'm going to totally theorize here. Completely.
Let's spend the remainder of the show speculating recklessly, because this
reckless
is
abandon.
This is the fun part that everyone wants to listen to. Go ahead.
Yeah, this is the part that I wish Brian Murphy was here to join us with, because he would be retching.
He would be just muting himself.
Screaming obscenities into the microphone.
Right. Give me your wild predictions.
I think Jack Swarbrick's playing a little bit of 4D chess here. I think he enjoyed how Notre Dame did as a member of the ACC. You give him he's basically greenlit a system that actually hinders Notre Dame based on the fact they're not a member of a conference.
Right.
They can't get one of the buys. They have to be an at-large team. He says, that's in exchange for not having to play a conference championship game. Well, maybe get in enough times as a lower seed, having to play on the road, never be able to get the top 4 is going to tick off the administration enough to say, you know what, just do it. I mean, just do it. Sign the dotted line. And then they end up as a member of the ACC, which is the most likely scenario if they join a conference. I think that'd be a very interesting theory on why he was willing to sacrifice his own school for the betterment of everyone else.
Interesting point. I'm going to engage in my own set of ridiculous, reckless speculation. All right. Do you know when the ACC's media deal expires?
The ACC?
ACC. Yes.
Well, I believe didn't they just sign like a 30-year deal or something like that?
Close.
Within the last few years?
It's through 2036.
2036.
With ESPN. Now, when does the Big Ten's media deal with, by the way, CBS, Fox, and ESPN, a giant conglomeration, when does that come up for bids?
You did say it's just around the corner. Off the air.
It is just around the corner.
You said, I believe, 2023 is
2023. That's right. Now, I don't know. When you start to look at how things line up, all right, 2023, let's see. Big Ten media deal coming up. We're starting to see the SEC has consolidated its media underneath the ESPN umbrella. It's no longer going to be CBS and ESPN. It's going to be ESPN only. We've seen the American consolidate under ESPN instead of splitting with CBS Sports with CBS and ESPN. I think the Big Ten is going to want to consolidate. And I think the Big Ten is going to want to consolidate with ESPN. And when they do, it's what triggers realignment isn't so much playoff, it's media contracts. And what I think is going to happen is the Big Ten is going to want to consolidate, and then NBC is going to dive in. Now, NBC, we know that they're giving up NBC Sports Network, but they still have a bunch of properties out there. And the Big Ten Network, which is a 50-50 joint venture between Fox and the Big Ten, well, whoever runs that network is going to be whoever the main TV partner is. So I could easily see that transferring over to NBC, and then NBC can go to Notre Dame and say, hey, if you join the Big Ten, we'll continue to air Notre Dame football from South Bend every other Saturday. But then you also get your road games on our television network as well, because we're going to air Big Ten football at noon, and then we push our start time back for Notre Dame football, at South Bend back to 3:30 if we want to, right? I think there's a possibility that if Notre Dame decides to join a conference, which I do think they have a big incentive to do now, it's going to be the Big Ten. It's not going to be the ACC, and they'll take all sports to the Big Ten. Now, how are the dominoes going to fall? This is where I think it's going to get real fun. We've been talking about before, and Lopez and I have talked about this all the time, kind of pointing and laughing. All the UCF people point and laugh at Nebraska, who got kicked out of the AAU, the American Association of Universities, as soon as they joined the Big Ten, which, by the way, the Big Ten is an academic league. It's not an athletic league. And a requirement for entry is you must be a member of the American Association of Universities.
Which is why purposes. No one should ever speculate that the UCF is going to the Big Ten anytime soon, because exactly. UCF is not joining the AAU anytime soon.
Yeah. Maybe one.
It could happen, maybe in a couple decades, but not anytime soon.
Now, there's already a lot of bad blood between Nebraska and the Big Ten. I think that marriage is irreparably damaged. And I would not be surprised to see Nebraska leave the Big Ten and jump back to the Big 12.
So here's the question. Do they leave or get kicked out?
Who cares? That's my answer.
It's more of how much laughter will we have?
It'll last us all about 5 minutes. I don't think Nebraska's going to care either, because I think they just want to get out of the Big Ten. So I could definitely see Notre Dame going to the Big Ten. I could definitely see Nebraska going back to the Big 12. In terms of the Big 12, that still leaves West Virginia as sort of they're an island. They're out on an island. They're like the redheaded stepchild out there. I wouldn't be surprised to see them take Notre Dame's spot in the ACC, and you kind of have like a three-way trade. And so what does that mean for UCF? Stay put.
Nothing. It means nothing.
Doesn't mean anything. Just stay put. You're in a league that you can win. You're in a league that has access to the playoff. If I'm Gus Malzahn, by the way, how about the last 6 months for that man? Huh?
I think he's the biggest winner in college football, in any shape or form.
Yeah, we're seeing all the articles about big winners and losers from the college football play. The big winner is Gus Malzahn.
Oh, everything.
He got the gigantic buyout from Auburn.
With no strings.
With no strings attached. Gets this job at UCF, recruit out of his mind in the state of Florida.
And he gets to be himself.
He gets to be himself. He doesn't have to worry about, Auburn level boosters breathing down his neck. And in addition to all that, you have a potential spot in the college football playoff now. This is great.
Oh, I mean, unbelievable.
Oh, take that man to Vegas with you. I mean, really, because his luck is just out of control right now. Anyway, I do think this, to sum up, I do think that, and we're going to get going here in a little bit, but I do think that this is going to put to bed a lot of the speculation about realignment. And I know we just spent the last 13 minutes doing that, but it's not going to be like it has been in the past with multiple teams changing conferences. I think it's going to be very, very limited, if at all. I think that the concept of being an independent will officially lose its luster. There are some, obviously we just heard today that that Army has re-upped their TV contract with CBS, so they're likely going to remain independent. But I think schools like UMass, UConn, New Mexico State, I think they're heading down to FCS. I just don't see.
Nobody wants them. I mean, that's the truth.
No
Nobody
FBS conference.
Them.
No FBS conference wants them, and UConn has openly said they don't want any FBS conference.
Well, UConn flat out, without in not as many words, basically said we don't care about football. I mean, that's what they did when they left the American to go join the Big East. Football was just basically left to die out there. Granted, the program was in shambles, but I mean, they did nothing to help it.
Yeah. But now there's zero incentive to being an independent if you're not.
There is one thing that's going to have to happen, and that you're going to have some rule changes in the NCAA regarding divisions and conference championship games, because the way this is going to be set up is I think it's a very possible reality that divisions go away, because it's going to be about making sure the top two teams meet each other from a record standpoint, instead of having, a loaded SEC West and an SEC East that's fair. You end up with just the best two teams, and you go from there. However, and this is where the Americans run it. The Americans running on an NCAA waiver, because right now the rules say if you go no division and you want a conference championship game, you need a round robin. That's what the Big 12 has. That's when they got to deregulate the conference championship game, and they brought it back. So if you want to have the best of both worlds, you're going to have the rules change. I think they'll eventually do it, but it has to be done. But
do you think that it might be? Sorry for interrupting. Do you think that there might be a possibility that if you're not a quote power conference, that, and I know that we're saying that this distinction may go away, but do you think that there's a possibility that, say, the American, the Mountain West, the Sun Belt, Conference USA, they might just do away with the conference championship games altogether?
I don't think so, because there's money to be had.
Yeah, but what's the incentive if I guess we'll have to see whatever the payouts look like from the future CFP, but what's the incentive in potentially having your number one team get knocked off?
Yeah, I can see risk in that. And I don't see the conference championship games ultimately going away just because of the guaranteed money that comes in. There's no guarantees in the CFP other than the Big Ten's going to get a team in, the SEC is going to get at least a team in, and the ACC is going to get, and Big 12 are going to get a team in. They're going to find a way to a team in. After that, all bets are off, as we saw in 2020. The Pac-12 is just an absolute mess at the moment, and it may not improve next year. It may take a while.
Well, it may. They just hired a new commissioner.
Yeah. Well, I mean, things don't change overnight, though.
Yeah.
They've got a lot of work to do, and I'm hopeful, because you'd hate to see, things just fall apart. Because in the end, no one wins when things just fall apart. Your quality of football goes down. We enjoyed the games against Stanford. We don't want Stanford to go away and fall apart into obscurity. We'd like to have them have bad years, but I'm talking about like falling apart. The Big 12 poaching the Pac-12 and making a conference mess. I think the one conference that probably won't change anything is the MAC. The MAC, along with the SEC, were the first conferences to start the conference championship game. They've been doing it since the early 90s, and I don't see them changing it. Because their chance of getting into the CFP playoffs is going to be the slimmest out of any of the conferences out there. All the talent is going south. That's why you're seeing the SEC dominance. You're seeing, the rise of the Sun Belt, the American. Cincinnati did well, but did great. And you're seeing Memphis improve. You've got UCF, who's enough said. We know what they've done.
Plenty of Southern teams in Conference USA too.
Exactly. Even Florida Atlantic had a really good run a couple years ago.
Yeah.
When they won Conference USA. The Sun Belt, Appalachian State, which is classified as a Southern school. Coastal Carolina, Southern school. I mean, you're looking at it as Southern movement. Everyone wants to come south. As far as recruiting. All the talent's down here. Texas, California, Florida, Alabama, there's Louisiana. There's a lot of good talent in that pocket. Georgia, that area, there is a lot of good FBS talent that schools are just going after. So it doesn't surprise me that those Southern schools are rising up. So I think the MAC may stay still, but the other ones, I could see getting rid of divisions and trying to do they're the best they can as far as just get the best two teams available. It's the American, the other G5, which that term that should eventually go away.
About non-A5.
The non-autonomous needs the capital. They need the money. And they don't make much money from their media deals. The bowls don't pay out well. They need that cash. And the way the bowl contracts are, all of these schools are locked out of the good bowls. Now, we failed to mention one thing, and it just made me think of it. One of the things they talked about is some of the bowl games going away in response to this plan of having more major bowl games involved with this new playoff. I believe it may have been Brett McMurphy said that maybe 6 to 10 bowl games could get axed. And I know Eric Lopez is celebrating because he feels there are way too many bowl games out there.
Eric did kind of do a victory lap when we showed him that tweet. I do agree that there are too many bowl games. They're not really games. They're 3.5 hour blocks of programming on ESPN in the middle of the holidays. My hope is that if there are bowls that go away, that none of them are the ones here in Orlando.
I mean, the Cure would be the only one that would end up potentially in the chopping block, but basically the games that take 6 and 6 MAC teams and 6 and 6 Sun Belt teams and throw them together, those are the ones that are going to get chopped.
Yeah, it's like the famous Idaho Potato Bowl up in Boise. Unfortunately for our friends at Boise, that one may become potato chips pretty quickly. Did
you just think of that?
Yes, I did actually.
Oh, okay.
So, I don't know about any. I do think like some like there's like 2 bowls. Remember, there's like 2 bowls in San Francisco or Santa Clara.
Well, I know like the Red Box Bowl and I think there was another one. They don't even have a date set for the 2021 season. They haven't even been confirmed.
Right.
All the ESPN owned bowls have been confirmed. There's been times and everything's locked up. So it's a possibility that there may be some bowls that don't make the cut for 2021. I think the Red Box Bowl was actually going to be cut in 2020 anyway. They had no home to go to.
Like here's
that's
like
one of the ones in San Francisco or in
the
Santa
Lending
Clara.
Tree Bowl in Mobile. I don't think anyone's looking at the calendar and saying, "Oh, great, let's go to Mobile, Alabama."
Hey, my thoughts about the Birmingham or maybe the Birmingham Bowl going away, and all I could think of is some of those Southern Bowls is Southern Florida University on a T-shirt. Do you remember that?
Oh my gosh, yeah. Oh man,
I think we just aged ourselves a little bit.
Oh, geez. Anyway, I want to wrap this up here because we got to get going. But, it's rare that I am pleasantly surprised by anything that happens in college football, and this week was one of those times.
I didn't see it coming.
I saw the first. I remember the first piece that came out. I forget who wrote the very first piece. Was saying, "Hey, this 12-team thing is actually a thing." I forget who shared it initially.
Was it Dodd? Was it Dodd?
Was it Dodd? I don't remember if it was Dodd. It might have been Dodd. When I looked at it, I was like, I just remember that my first look at it was, yeah, right. They're just trying to hook people in. And
just to disappoint them.
Just to disappoint us in the end. And lo and behold, this is what's actually happening. And again, I don't want to
get your hopes up.
I don't want to get my hopes up too much because this still has 2 rounds of voting that it has to get through. But
what if Greg Sankey says this is what we want to have happen? I think things are going to fall into place.
I mean, that's if Greg Sankey said, does that make Greg Sankey the most powerful man in college football?
Oh, yeah. He totally is right now.
Totally. And hence, oh man. I just
without a slight doubt, Greg Sankey, the SEC commissioner, is by far the most powerful man in college football.
I can't believe that they're really going to do this. I have been on the record saying constantly that the ideal playoff is 16 with 10 automatic bids. Yeah, Eric has gone out there saying that he thinks that one day in the next contract, the one after this, they're going to go to 16.
It really depends how this one plays out.
I think I agree. I think
if this one goes well,
but this is a quantum leap. I thought that they may never go to 8. You know, that maybe they would go to 6. I don't know, but I think cautiously optimistic for the next 6 days that this will actually happen when we get the details after the meetings on Thursday and Friday, and then after the president's committee on the 22nd. It may be as soon as this time next week that we know exactly what and how is going to go down.
It won't be finalized from the CFP side until September at the earliest. So it's going to take time. We just have to be patient and optimistic. We know at least the base structure, which looks great. We don't know how the financial football is going to be. We don't know if every conference gets an equal share, and then you get units, basically, kind of like the NCAA tournament does, based on number of teams in and how far you go. We don't know how that's going to play out. And I have a feeling we're probably going to be a little disappointed when that all works out. I think you're still going to have a case of the rich getting richer and the poor getting only slightly richer when it's all said and done. But I hope I'm wrong.
Yeah, man, I don't know. It's God, I hope this happens. This, everyone's like, "Oh, this is like a foregone conclusion." I still don't think that it is. I don't know why. I'm sick and tired of college football ripping out the rug from underneath
your heart. Just say, "Rip out your heart."
Yeah, I can't stand it.
You've been around enough UCF games over the millennia that you are used to victory being snatched away from you. Yeah. Snatching defeat from the jaws of victory.
Speaking of which, you're continuing on as we look at programming coming up this week. The newsletter is back. Make sure you subscribe to it.
Yes, the newsletter is back, and Jeff is all over it.
And I am all over that. It's been, so far, the first 2 that have gone out have been pretty good. Make sure you subscribe to it. Take a look at blackandgoldbanneret.com for that. Follow us on social, UCF_Banneret, Facebook.com/blackandgoldbanneret. Now, Drew, you're also working on your features as well on the Throwback Classics. Is that right?
Yep. Episode 3, our 3rd game, comes out later this week. And this, for those who were there, this was a very impactful game for people.
Now you got me excited. Now you got me excited.
You know what it is.
I can't even remember. It's so late at night now. I don't even remember.
Well, I'll break it just so that people. The 3rd episode will be the 2011 Red Bandana game against Boston College.
Blowout win.
It was a blowout win the day before the 10th anniversary of 9/11, and I was able to interview Neil Serrana, who was one of the guys involved in the grassroots push from the students to do the red bandana aspect of it before the school kind of bought into it. Nice. And I was able to talk to him about it, and he was really excited to bring it back up. It's been almost 10 years since it's happened. I was at that game as a fan with the red bandana and everything. And this is one of those games where I would say off the field, it was probably the most, impact I felt as a fan. Once you remove yourself from the game, but from the game aspect, man, UCF had just an absolute ball of a time. It took a little while, but seeing that last touchdown with Jeff Godfrey running over Luke Kuechly, that was beautiful.
Gosh, that was the time. By the way, it was Pete Thamel who dropped the first article out there.
Yes, from Yahoo Sports.
From Yahoo Sports. So, wow. Thamel was on it, man. Got to hand that guy some credit. So
credit's got to go somewhere, right?
I know. It's got to go. So it's been fun. Follow us on Twitter, by the way. Statboy Drew, Jeff_Sharon. You can also follow Eric. Eric will be back next week. And we'll
he needs a hug.
Eric has just absolutely had it with everybody at this point.
He needs a hug.
I get it. I get it sometimes, but wow. I mean, we are on the verge of a truly earth-shaking week in college football. After one earth-shaking week, and one that could very well end up giving us something that we've always wanted as UCF fans. A shot. A legit.
That's all we want is a shot.
That's all we want. I always say the same thing. Like, every athlete at every level always says the same thing. Like, all I want is a shot. If I don't make it, I don't make it. But all I want is a shot.
Prove it on the field. And that's always been things. Right. Settle it on the field. Yep. And let there be a true champion.
Yes. And now we may finally
after 100+ years.
Yes. Thanks to Bryson Turner for talking to us about track and field. It's Bryson Turner on Twitter. Make sure you follow him. All the best to Rayniah Jones and Anne-Marie Blaney this coming week at the U.S. Olympic Trials. That should be a lot of fun, and we're hoping for the best for them. So for Andrew Gluchov and Bryson Turner, I'm Jeff Sharon saying thank you so much for listening to the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast. If you subscribe to our podcast, thank you so much. Please leave a rating and a comment wherever you listen to your podcast. If you don't, you can find us on Apple Podcasts if you're an iPhone or Apple user. If you're on Android, you can find us on Spotify as well. And if you do subscribe to us already, thank you so much. Make sure you tell a friend, a UCF friend in your orbit about us. Again, we've been seeing our podcast download numbers increase every month from the time we actually started this. And it's gratifying to see, and we're really appreciative of it. And we hope to see that continue with your help as we head into the summer. So for Andrew Gluchov, I'm Jeff Sharon saying thank you so much for listening to the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast. We will see you next week. Keep tabs on us for all the latest on the CFP and the Olympic trials.